Well, thank you very much for the introduction. Today is Earth Day. It's an especially appropriate day to talk about sacred and inspirational mountains, which enshrine a reverence for nature and provide a sustainable basis for efforts to preserve the environment. This course is going to draw heavily on the second edition of my book, Sacred Mountains of the World, which has just been recently published by Cambridge University Press, originally came out earlier. Now, one of the ways this book came about is a number of years ago, I gave an all-day seminar at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington. And I started off by saying, you may think you're very far away from sacred mountains here, but just up the mall is Capitol Hill. And the model for Capitol Hill is Mount Sinai, where Moses received the 10 Commandments, which are the basis of law and ethics for modern society. I said this sort of off the top of my head. But a year or two later, my younger son, Jonathan, came on a Berkeley High School field trip to Washington, and they went into the Capitol, and there in the chamber of the House of Representatives were various reliefs of famous lawmakers, and right in the center was Moses. So I was right. So what this shows is that, contrary, a number of people might think that the subject of sacred mountains is esoteric and it's on the fringes of their interests. But actually, as this course will show, it's quite the opposite. Mountains are naturally associated with the highest and most central values and aspirations of cultures around the world. We've seen that now with Mount Sinai. For example, the San Francisco peaks in Arizona near Flagstaff are viewed as sacred sources, divine sources of water and healing by the Navajo and the Hopi, very important for them. Mount Fuji in Japan symbolizes the quest for beauty and simplicity that lies at the heart of Japanese culture, and the mountain has become a symbol of the entire nation. Mount Kailas in Tibet represents for hundreds of millions of Hindus and Buddhists the highest attainments of spiritual liberation. In the modern world, Mount Everest, and the picture, as you said, is a picture I took of Everest. Everest sort of symbolizes the highest goal you can strive to attain, whether your pursuit be material or spiritual. And take Mount Olympus, famous mountain from ancient Greek mythology, which I've done research on in Greece. It's responsible for the Olympics because the Olympics are traced back to the worship of Zeus, who was on top of Mount Olympus and threw a thunderbolt, which landed, according to tradition, at Olympia, where the first Olympic Games were held. Now, the subject of sacred, and I include inspirational mountains, I think is a marvelous way of taking us into all sorts of fields and areas of related interest, ranging from religious studies, geography, anthropology, history, literature, art, to climate change and environmental conservation. And I'll draw on work I've been doing with national parks and World Heritage sites on basically taking the inspirational and cultural value of nature and mountains and using them to motivate people to preserve the environment. Now, the course will highlight the incredible diversity of ways in which mountains are sacred. Just to give you a little bit of a sample of this, for example, many mountains are revered as high places. They're also very important as centers of the world or the universe, sources of water, places of inspiration and renewal. Now, in a very deep way, I think in an almost universal way, mountains have an extraordinary power to evoke the experience of something of deeper significance or reality that gives meaning and vitality to people's lives. Now, that's something maybe religious, an idea of God, or it may be secular, just nature and putting yourself in touch with something you value deeply in nature. Whatever that something is, it generally awakens a sense of wonder and awe and really motivates people and reaches them deep in their hearts and minds. We'll see in particular how mountains have inspired major works of literature and art from the West to the East. The course will also draw, as I say, on work I've done with national parks like Yosemite, Hawaii volcanoes, Mount Rainier National Park, Great Smoky Mountains, and also work with World Heritage sites, in particular, trying to get the most sacred mountain in the world for about 1 billion people in Asia nominated as a World Heritage Site in various protected areas. We'll look at the significance the mountains have, not only for indigenous traditions and mainstream religions like Buddhism, Christianity, and others, but also for the general public. many of whom, of course, are secular. And we'll see how mountains can be sacred in a personal as well as a religious or traditional sense. So, for example, right here in California, we have Yosemite National Park. And Yosemite, for many people, especially here in the Bay Area, is sacred as a place of special significance and inspiration. It's inspired incredible works of literature, the photography of Ansel Adams, for example. We'll explore all that in the course. John Muir wrote of Yosemite Valley that it was, for him, a temple far finer than any made by human hands. And you can see there, Yosemite is a sacred place, and that sort of writing really inspired and was behind the origins of the modern day environmental movement. So what I'd like to do is invite you to join me on a journey to some of the most beautiful, spectacular, and meaningful places on Earth. And on the way, we'll better Jules Verne and Phileas Fogg by going around the world in just 8 hours rather than 80 days. So finally, what I'd like to conclude with is give you a taste in miniature, since the picture of me and what's here, of a few of the mountains we'll be visiting. So the mountain you're seeing behind me now is Mount Kailas in Tibet, the most sacred mountain in the world for about 1 billion people in Asia. Here is Machu Picchu in Peru, which is situated where it is, probably because it's been between 4 sacred mountains. This spectacular site, which we see here, is Huashan in China, one of the 4 major sacred mountains and the most spectacular of the sacred mountains in China. Right here in California, this is an Indian ritual, a Wintu ritual on the slopes of Mount Shasta, very important mountain for a number of tribes in Northern California. Here you see one of the oldest Christian monasteries in the world, the monastery of St. Catherine at the foot of Jebel Musa, recognized by many as the original Mount Sinai. And this is a view from the summit of Mount Sinai at dawn, and you can see it as a place, kind of place where Moses could have, a primordial landscape in which he could have been in touch with something way beyond himself. This is the picture on the cover, which actually here, this is Mount Everest seen in alpenglow with the planet Jupiter right next to the summit. Here, of course, in California is our own sacred Yosemite Valley. And then down here is one of probably the most famous work of Japanese art outside of Japan. This is the Great Wave off Kanagawa, block print by Hokusai, which we'll explore in great depth for its meaning. And finally, one of the most beautiful mountains in the world in the Himalayas, a peak called Sinyochu. So thank you, and I hope you can join me on this journey.